Hello, everybody. It's Ryan and Duck here from the Harder to Breathe podcast. Now, those of you who are regular listeners of the show, or if this is your first time seeing it, welcome. We typically have, hour-long conversations with guests about mental health, things like that. But we wanted to make a special episode today to talk about a show that a lot of people have been watching and talking about that having a very big impact, and it has a lot of connection to our show because there's a lot of themes that are discussed on that show that are very poignant, very timely. And that show is Adolescence on Netflix. For those of you who haven't seen the show, if you want to avoid spoilers, I think we're going to talk about it. So press pause on this, go bang out 4 quick episodes of Adolescence and come back to us because you're going to want to talk to it. What a show, right? Like what an experience, what a feeling that evokes. It's a show that deals with a 13-year-old boy in England who is accused of murdering a peer, a young woman in his class. That's not a spoiler because that's not really the point of the show. It's not a whodunit. That's what makes it so unique. It's not putting the pieces together like, oh, did he do that? It really is one of the first shows that I've ever seen, and Ryan, maybe you can speak to it, that has really dealt with the psychology and the backstory behind how these experiences, these feelings, these developmental steps happen in our society today. I told you to watch it because my wife and I watched it and I was like, I need Ryan's take on this as a therapist.
What was your experience that you were thinking my experience would either aid or...
I specifically wanted your take on the 3rd episode, which if you've seen the show, it's the episode where he is dealing with the social worker. It's basically a 1-hour scene with just the two of them going back and forth. And I know that you've had a lot of experience dealing with, at the Center for Anxiety, dealing with families and kids specifically who are in very heightened states, right on the edge of a very traumatic situation. And I wanted to gauge your how real that was, how accurately that portrayed that kind of very fraught interaction where you as a mental health professional are trying to do your job and assess a child, but also your heart must just be breaking to see this kid going through this emotional roller coaster, be afraid in those moments where he suddenly becomes this very aggressive monster. All those things together, that's what I wanted your take on specifically.
Okay. Yeah. So when I started watching the show, I really didn't know what to expect because I thought it was going to be a whodunit.
Right.
And of course, it is also a show that is shot. Each episode is just one long unbroken take of up to an hour, which is a tracking shot. Except for episode 3, they're tracking shots where they go out. They're on car rides. Yeah. They're going
through windows onto drones. And once you've watched the show, I highly recommend watching some of the behind the scenes footage of how they did it because it's all practical. Like I said, they're holding the camera, and then while they're shooting this scene, they're quietly attaching a drone, and then at the end they let go and the camera takes off. I mean, it's filmmaking at the highest level. So kudos there to the entire crew and to all the creators for coming up with such a masterful plan. But all that aside, the storytelling is what just blew me away the most.
Yeah, because if it had just been that, like everyone was raving about it, and I didn't know if that was the reason why you were raving about it. It was just for technical reasons.
Filmmaking, yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's kind of like for me when somebody tells me, oh, you got to check out this guitar player, and I'm like just going to see him wank and play a shredder solo for 4 hours, and it's like, how does that further the narrative?
And where's the heart and soul?
Exactly. I think that once I understood the story, it all kind of made a little more sense to me and understood how the flow of it and the feeling of it has a lot to do with how the story is told and the story they're trying to tell. Before you dive into all the things that are at play in the script and in the performance, just the actual emotional, visceral experience of watching this interplay between these two characters was both impressive and moving.
Yeah.
The lady that he's speaking to in that scene, the psychologist
also
who's doing the assessment, just the way she's having to stay present with him, even though he's portraying some really disturbing behavior, and then she finally lets loose at the end and lets it out. Mm-hmm. Yes, that all rang very true to me. Not because I ever had an experience with a kid like that, because what I see being depicted there accurately is extreme narcissism and probably the makings of well, already he's killed someone. So sociopathy, right?
Yeah.
So you would call it conduct disorder, which if you're under 18, it wouldn't yet be a personality disorder. But conduct disorder is when you're showing disregard for other people's safety or their autonomy to get your own needs met. You have destruction of property or violence and getting in trouble with the law. These types of kids at that age doing those types of things, it's not going to fare well usually unless there's a real intervention. But oftentimes the groundwork has already been laid for later diagnoses like narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. Antisocial is something that gets confused a lot because when we hear that word, we think somebody who's asocial, just not interested in being social.
Yeah.
Antisocial is more or less synonymous with sociopathy, meaning not able to follow the rules of society.
Got it.
Okay, so when I see that portrayal, I'm like, here's a 14-year-old actor portraying the kind of sociopathy that you are accustomed to seeing Robert De Niro as a crazy, mob boss giving. And what wellspring of experience did he draw from? Yeah. So I was like, it threw me for a loop, and I kind of want to go back and watch the first 2 episodes now. There's so much going on in the context of this in terms of what the story is playing out. How did this kid get there? Traditionally, we think so much about like when kids end up with problems that become those kind of personality disorders, people who are very high on narcissism, low on empathy and conscience. It's pretty extreme trauma, usually within the household, that causes those types of things. There's some argument to be said that the people are born with certain temperaments. And just like anything else, I'm sure some people are born higher on the scale in terms of narcissism or psychopathy even. Like there's some debate, like was Jeffrey Dahmer made or was he born that way? Right. It's hard to prove these types of things, but we kind of accept the premise that your original attachments, namely your parents usually, are the ones that create the kind of wounds, the psychic wounds that create that kind of anger and need to act out in those ways. Yeah. And when I'm watching that, I'm thinking to myself, okay, they've already laid out the context of the parents are relatively good parents. They're present. Yeah. The father has some history of trauma.
He pulled a shed down once.
Yeah. And he's got, obviously you can see it played out in his performance that there is, some trouble with emotional regulation, that he has a temper and that he's not, I don't think violent, but he just doesn't really know
where to put it.
He doesn't know where to put it. Yeah. Exactly. And you could imagine how that might affect a young boy and his ability to regulate his own emotions. But there's this whole other element in terms of the societal, cultural influence. Yeah. And that's what's so fascinating about the show, because it's not just a play on how does someone become narcissistic? How does someone become violent?
How do their parents fuck up?
Yeah.
It's all the little pieces put together. It paints this complete picture of society, of parenting, of school. We get to see
social media being the big one.
Social media being the big one, but we see that depiction of a school in England some of the classes are depicted as just a madhouse, and the teachers are zookeepers. They're not teaching. They're just trying to keep kids from going crazy, and it's just such a masterful stroke of not beating us over the head with it, of saying he's looking at porn did it. His dad hit him. It's none of those things. It's all these little pieces put together that paint this picture. It reminded me so much of The Wire, in the way that The Wire was a 5-season show that showed how a city dies. For those of you who haven't watched The Wire, what the hell's wrong with you? But go watch The Wire. But the first season is about drugs. The second season is about the death of the port and the industry. Schools. So it shows all these different aspects of a city, the infrastructure of a city crumbling from within. And this show does the same thing in terms of how we are letting our youth down and letting our kids down. Not through any fault, but just the way that our society has developed with social media, with parents who are working. The dad's a hardworking plumber. He's gone a lot of the day. Things like that. All those things have added up to create this monster. And I mean, it just, the subtlety of it, but also the specificity of it is what makes it so breathtaking.
The context that's given in episode 2, where the police detective's son enlightens him about what's going on with the emojis and the bullying that's going on. Obviously, bullying is that is traumatic to people enough to create the kind of anger and acting out that a bad parent could as well cause. But what's different now that you're seeing is there's this whole subculture, in particular with young boys and men, around reacting to feminist movement and the empowerment of girls and feeling diminished, and how men need to rise up and become powerful again and hyper masculinity as something to aspire to, as a way to react against that. And it's the Tate brothers, right, is the big part of that. They reference that in the show. Mm-hmm. You're seeing this playing out in terms of like what our images are of what masculinity is, what is an appropriate way to react to feeling diminished.
Right.
And you see in that episode 3, it's not a coincidence, of course, that the character he's talking to is a woman. And what was fascinating is that I noticed right at the start of that scene, he's like kind of playing with her, almost flirting with her.
He's flirting with her.
He's flirting with her. And I'm like, this is a very charismatic, charming kid. And then there's a moment when he feels like she's trying to control him or trying to get him to...
And suddenly there's pushback.
And then he
how
gets
dare you?
Just so enraged.
Yeah.
And it's not just a look at like what happens to one individual who becomes somebody who has problems with anger management or misogyny. It's a statement on our culture in terms of why is this happening more often?
Right.
I've spoken at colleges a few different times, NYU, USC, different professors. So it's not just one isolated incident, where the girls have become much more the type A personalities. They're the ones sort of ruling the roost. They're the overachievers. They're the ones who are on the fast track to be the CEO, and the one sort of, and you can see it in the personality type. And the boys are becoming more meek and submissive and more anxious. Is that what that's an outgrowth of specifically? There's a lot of different factors at play, and there's a shift in terms of gender roles and things. But what you're seeing whenever something changes, and it's probably a correction that needed to happen, because for the longest time in history, men were always assumed to be the dominant one and the ones that are going to be in control and in relationships, in the boardroom, in whatever. And now we needed to balance the scales. But whenever that happens culturally, there's pushback and there's a backlash. And so there's this cultural moment where, because we've had that much progress for women, boys don't know what their role is anymore. Yeah. And they either retreat and become anxious and submissive, but then you get called a beta male and all these terrible pejorative terms about a man or a boy who's not alpha or basically toxically masculine. And we forget that there's a balance between masculine and feminine. Sure. I, for one, and this is just my personal take and opinion, believe that masculine and feminine exists within all of us, and there's a balance between the two. That's not to say that you can't be one more than the other, and that if you're all just one thing, you're probably too far to one extreme, and not balanced out in the ways that we talk about having a balanced approach to anything in life.
And you're also probably exhausted. That's an exhausting way to live. Yeah. Where you have to apply this dominant masculine, look at this soda. This, everything's got to be macho. And any sign of that feminine side, or just accepting something is a sign of weakness. That's got to be an exhausting life to live, So what plays out as much as the individual psychology and the context of the school and the social media and the Tate brothers and all this stuff, the shifting dynamics in our culture in general, and how are we reacting to that? Because oftentimes the first reaction is not the best one. It's a defensive one. It's an overreactive one. Well, but he's a stand-in for the issue writ large. It's like you say, it's not, well, if you put all these elements into a bowl, you're going to create a murderer. Right. But it's a warning sign to show how all these things can contribute to.
I would think that if you look at somebody who, for instance, does kill a girl or becomes a serial killer who kills women, the culture probably had something to do with that. Most people like that probably had some predisposition for it and severe trauma that caused that in the household or otherwise. I don't think it happens just by suggestion. Right. But that's not to say it's not having that effect on a lot of people. Because there are a lot of boys who feel insecure, and maybe don't react in the best way, like I said, in one extreme or the other, retreating or becoming hyper masculine and overreactive. And you see it on both sides of the equation in terms of how we look at these things. Like, boys are lost, and there's a real problem with young men in our culture right now, and that is true.
Yeah.
However, it's like, well, then can you understand that for eons in our society,
women have been lost?
And it's like women are told mixed messages all the time. It's like, well, you have to be chaste and pure and be virginal, but don't be a tease.
Right.
Be completely dependent on men. Your role is to be a wife and a mother and care for the home, and yet don't have issues around making sure you can tie a man down and stuff like that. It's like so confusing. Any of us would lose our minds if we were put in that double bind situation.
Right. Let's remove those uteruses. Take care of it. Right.
And I just have so much compassion for the experience of girls and women, and those things aren't gone completely.
Yeah.
We have done a lot of work to try to overcome the history of that. And thankfully, women have the opportunity now. And it is confusing on the other end. You were just alluding to, it's like women now, it's like, well, you have the ability to be a CEO and you can do anything you want. You can have it all.
Right.
Have it all. What does that mean? I can be a mother and run a company. And it's like, is that even healthy for an individual, let alone for the child who has a mother who's never there?
Or if you're a woman who decides you don't want to have children, even though that's now supposed to be, that's the idea, like that's your prerogative. There's still a stigma of, when are you going to have kids? Oh, you're not going to have them? Why? So what's wrong? You know, there's all these, like you say, these double standards. And I wanted to go back to what you said about there's always a pushback. You know, there's always, when there's a vacuum created, you know, it's the same thing that we see politically, where 8 years of Obama gives us Donald Trump and vice versa. And Black Lives Matter is only saying, let's give Black people the same rights and right to live that white people have. So it just, again, I marvel at this show's ability to show that without hitting us over the head with it. Yeah. You know, and the young man's desire to try to pump himself up sexually to the therapist, telling him that he's seen boobs and that a girl touched his knob, and then he has to admit that actually never happened. I don't know why I said that.
That's nothing rare though, right? We've all did that to a certain.
But the porn aspect of this, the Instagram models that he follows and stuff, that's an aspect that
80% of women are only attracted to the top 20% of desirability in men. My reaction to that is that's probably true both ways. And the reason for that, if that is more pronounced than it ever was before, is because of social media and dating apps. I've had a few clients, and I'm not going to be too specific on this, that were young men that were dealing with some of the very same issues. Not that they were psychopathic killers, but just in terms of, guys. Just the insecurity of, like, I go on these dating apps and it's like, I feel like the women are interested in only the most desirable men, the men that look like they're on a yacht and they have $1 billion and they have a 12-pack of abs and you know, they just the most supremely attractive men in every way you can imagine, and that like 99% of the women are only going to go for that 1% of that. And it used to be that you met someone at school or you met someone in the workplace who was like, oh, he's kind of cute. He's like, you know, he's working at the same shop that I'm working at. He's clearly not a billionaire, but we hit it off and I like him and we have something in common. And that's less likely to happen now because of this, another way in which living online and having that avatar is not real connection. We're all holding out for this fantasy. Girls growing up under these conditions are kind of feeling like, well, here's the kind of guy that I want, you know, and we're led to believe you all are just one choice away from the Kardashian life. And you're going to be a billionaire too. And you're going to live on a yacht and you're going to do all this stuff. If you just can attract a billionaire boyfriend and all that stuff. But I think it happens the other way too. It's like you have all these young boys, and it shows this in adolescence as well, that are looking at these extremely attractive, highly desirable Instagram influencers and models and in porn, you know, the hyper-sexualized women that aren't walking down the street every day.
And if they are, they're not in full makeup, and so you wouldn't even know that they were, because that's not a realistic ideal.
Right, and the expectation, even if you did find someone like that, is like they're supposed to perform for me in that way, that I'm supposed to be gratified to the level that porn gratifies me. And that's not the way that it ever was before this, that we had those expectations of our partners to that extreme. And so you see I think on both extremes, this unrealistic expectation of what I'm entitled to.
Yeah.
I'm entitled to sex with super desirable women who are going to satisfy my every need because I just turn on my computer and I get
and they
that.
all are really into it. They all love it. Yeah.
They're super. And then so but it works both ways. And obviously, historically, the things that women are looking for in terms of security in men and stuff is a little bit different than the sexual aspect that a lot of boys are looking for, especially when you're young. And so you see that playing out with him. And I think that's why they put the stuff in there with the Instagram models and stuff, because that's the influence of that culturally on the way that we are. And I don't know the answer to it. I mean, I try to work with some of these young men that I've worked with, and how you explain to them, it's like, you're going to have your day. You're going to find your partners. There's somebody out there that's just right for you. But how do you meet that person now when the only way people are interacting is online? It's like they're only looking for a partner on an app, and they're only going to be satisfied if they have a certain amount of money or if they look a certain way. And you don't even get to know them unless they satisfy those prerequisites.
It's not something that they really touch on a lot on the show, but I think about, I have a young son who's is heading into puberty, and I think about pornography.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a problem with pornography. I enjoy pornography. I grew up kind of with a Playboy, and I think that was a healthy kind of way to secretly find out about sex. I didn't have a father who talked to me about it a lot because he was gone, but I'm terrified now. And I feel like I have to have an interventional conversation with my son before he discovers pornography in that way, to say, it's cool if you find this stuff and you are interested in it, but you need to understand that it's not real. You need to understand that it is not an ideal to be yearned for, that the relationship that you have with someone that you love and sex with that person is not what you see on that screen. And it's really important that you understand that, because there are unrealistic expectations that sets up, unrealistic treatment of women. There's a lot of rough sex in porn these days, a lot of misogyny and a lot of like infantilization of women, things that are kind of really unhealthy, which, again, they don't touch on too much in the show, but it is sort of alluded to that these girls are doing things on Instagram. So of course they want me to see their boobs, because they're wearing a bikini and they're pushing their boobs together. So they clearly want me to see it. So why am I wrong? Because I'm just doing what, you know what I mean? It's something that really hits deep with me, because like I said, it's something that I know I'm going to have a conversation about soon.
Well, I think what that hits on too, though, is that because of all this, girls then are feeling like they have to do those things in order to attract a boy. If I don't send them a picture of me nude or otherwise, they're going to lose interest, because that's what they expect. And so it makes the whole stew toxic.
I feel so old fashioned in that I remember, like, I pretty much only had girlfriends growing up. I didn't have a lot of casual like hookups, but the few times that I did in high school, I'd like hook up with a girl that I didn't really know. I immediately was like, well, I guess that's my girlfriend now. I immediately assigned emotional connection to any physical act of love, where I was like, okay, we made out at a concert. She's my girlfriend. And for like 2 weeks, she was my girlfriend. And she was like, I don't really want to be your girlfriend. And I was like, oh, I was devastated, you know? And I think maybe it's old fashioned to have such a kind of romantic view of, well, if I'm going to share this with you, then we have an intimate relationship. And I wonder what that is for kids these days. Is it as casual as trading cards? Like here's Becky's nudes. She sent it to me. In Adolescence, he talks about that girl sent a picture to a boy, and that boy showed it to everybody. And the therapist asked him, do you think he was wrong for doing that? And he struggled with that question. He was like, well, she sent it. She wanted it to be seen, And so it's a really weird kind of, we talked in an interview recently with William Trubridge about, how our evolution has, we don't need to have the same fight or flight response that we had when we were, 10,000 years ago. And I think about the speed at which technology and society is accelerating, that even me, 30 years removed from puberty and dating, I'm not equipped to say, here's how it works, son. Here's how it's going to work, because I don't know how it's going to work. And it might even be different in 3 years when he is, looking to date. And so it's a really terrifying thing as a parent. It's a terrifying thing as a healthy member of a society where you want everyone to succeed and flourish and be healthy, to say, I don't know what we're teaching youth. I don't know if the messages are getting through that this isn't real, that this isn't the way things are done. You know, and it's why a show like this hits so hard, because it isn't just, wow, that was really cool and entertaining. It's like, man, that's really kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
Watch this. And if you are, certainly if you're a parent, but you know, if you are contributing in some way to those stereotypes or those irresponsible choices, that you need to see the effect that it has on the next generation and on women. It's just, I think it's really important. And I don't think it's just, hey, this is a great show, you should watch it. I think it's a really important show. They hired the right actors. They wrote the scene the perfect way.
You choose something that you want to make a commentary about, something that you think is worthy of playing out on film.
Yeah.
And then you present it in a way in which it's not just like one message that you're going to walk away from it. Like, the message of that was this.
Right.
It's like you come away with more questions than you have answers, because it makes you think. And that's why I reacted equally strongly to the show, which is saying a lot, because a lot of times when people recommend things to me, my first reaction is like, oh, I'm not going to like it. I'm supposed to like this. And in the first episode, I was thinking, I was like, oh, the clever tracking shot. Look how good the cinematographer is, whatever. And then I was like, by the end of the first episode, when you realize there are so many layers to this and there's so much going on, you're like, I don't know where this is going to go.
Right.
And each episode is kind of unconventional in terms of how you tell the story.
Right.
And
we've sort of glossed over some of the amazing scenes, like the family trip to the hardware store in the last scene, where you know the husband and wife are telling their whole story to their seemingly really well-adjusted daughter. You know, and they say at the end, like, "What did we do differently with her?" And the wife says, "Nothing. We did it the same." Yeah. But the other influences on the son are what, you know. I just think, man, it really left me floored in it. And I hope you found something useful in this. If you haven't watched the show and you listen to this, I still think you could still enjoy it, because I don't think, like I said, it isn't a whodunit. There's no spoilers in that. But I think it's just a really important conversation to be had. And I thank you for taking the time to share it with me. If you've enjoyed this conversation and you want to check out other things that we do, check out the Harder to Breathe podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We also upload all the clips to YouTube, and on Instagram you can find us. We have discussions like this all the time with guests in the arts and entertainment industry, but also in the mental health field. We kind of just get into this stuff, and we're trying to do our part to do exactly what we were saying. Have those conversations about those delicate subjects that are touched on in adolescence, and bring a little bit of awareness to the world and destigmatize those conversations. So, and
you've done my job for me today.
It's true. You can leave. I think I've got it from here on out. So please check out new episodes of the Hard to Read podcast every Tuesday on all podcast platforms. And we thank you for joining us today. Take care.